Hey, it's Johnny Jet, and this is my 39 travel questions. And today we have Cory Lee, who actually just wrote a children's book. It's coming out next month officially. Is that correct?
On July 26th, so in about 2 months.
Two
Yeah.
months. Well, I was kind enough to get a advanced copy, and I can't wait to read it to my boy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope you loved it, and I hope he loves it too.
I'm sure he will. So, Cory, let's jump right into it. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a very, very small town in Northwest Georgia. It's called Lafayette, but most people would pronounce it Lafayette. So I grew up there, and it's a town of less than 10,000 people, so very, very small. We only have like a Walmart and pretty much nothing else. So the nearest bigger city is Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's about 30 minutes away. And then Atlanta is about an hour and a half away.
Okay, so when you fly out of Atlanta, you still live there, or do you live?
I do. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So your main airport is Atlanta, I guess.
Always Atlanta. Yeah, they have Chattanooga does have an airport, but they don't have very many nonstop flights. And so as a wheelchair user, I usually just prefer a nonstop to get where I'm going the fastest way I can and less transferring in and out of the plane and all that. So usually always out of Atlanta.
So talking about being a wheelchair user, uh, you're comfortable talking about it? How long it's been and all that
Yeah,
stuff. Your backstory.
yeah, I was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy at the age of 2, and that's a form of muscular dystrophy, which you've probably heard of, like the muscular dystrophy telethon every year with Jerry Lewis. And so I was diagnosed with that at 2, and really the most steps that I could ever take was about 8 steps. And then by the age of 4, I was using a motorized wheelchair full time. And so spinal muscular atrophy, it is genetic. And so some of my great aunts and uncles, they actually had SMA as well. And so then it skipped a couple generations, and then eventually I was the lucky one to get it again. So it's genetic, but I've been in a power wheelchair since the age of 4, and so I'm pretty good at driving it by now, I think.
Well, I mean, it's amazing because you've been to more countries than 99% of Americans. And how many countries have you been to?
I've been to 37 countries and all 7 continents.
All 7 continents. I just saw you just completed the Antarctica just a couple months ago.
Yeah, just this past February, so right before the coronavirus pandemic started, luckily.
So being in a wheelchair, I mean, has not slowed you down at all. I mean, and what is your earliest travel memory?
My earliest memory was probably like going to Disney World. So Disney is only about 10 hours away from where I live. And I remember like my whole family, we took a road trip and went to Disney, and that's kind of the first travel memory for me. And I just like really only remember sitting in Cinderella's castle and having like the character breakfast. So that's kind of all I remember of it, but it was a fun trip.
And how about when's the first time that you flew?
The first time I flew was actually from Atlanta to Los Angeles in 2003. So I was 13, and I flew to LA for the Teen Choice Awards. And so I was able to like go backstage and actually even be a presenter on the Teen Choice Awards through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And so it was a remarkable trip and so much fun. I got to like hang out with Britney Spears and The Rock and like all these really cool celebrities. So a fun first flying memory.
That's amazing. So, I mean, what are the challenges of flying? And I mean, how many flights have you taken? I mean, you've flown hundreds of thousands, if not a million miles, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I fly pretty frequently. So I don't know exactly how many flights, but I mean, well over 100, I would say. But I mean, I don't know how long you have, but we can.
No, I mean, do some airlines do it better? And I mean, what are the challenges like that?
Yeah, some airlines. I mean, I usually stick with Delta because they are based in Atlanta, so they have more nonstops than any other airline out of Atlanta. So for me, they tend to be the best, and I kind of have gotten to know the crew in the Atlanta airport pretty well by flying so much. So they are willing to like help me out and get me on the plane comfortably and get the wheelchair loaded properly. And I know that they know what to do in Atlanta, but the trouble comes when I'm like arriving in a foreign country and they, don't speak English and I don't speak Spanish or whatever the language is. And so then trying to relay, exactly how to unload the wheelchair or load it and how to pick me up physically to get me out of the plane seat and back into the wheelchair, that's always a bit of an obstacle, but we make it happen and make it work.
And do you always travel with your mom?
Not always with my mom, but usually a lot. So she loves traveling just as much as I do, but I do always travel with a companion, whether it's a caregiver or a friend or family member. But my mom does go with me a lot. Yeah.
Well, your mom looks so young, first of all, and it turns out that we're the same age, which I had no idea. And I didn't know it was your mom. I thought, she might've been your girlfriend. This is, when I first saw her, that's how young she looks.
Yeah, she's going to appreciate that comment.
Well, it's true. So by the way, where can people find you before we jump into it?
Yeah, so my blog is curbfreewithcorylee.com.
And which you won the Webby Award last year. You were nominated this year.
Yeah.
And I saw that you came up runner-up or this year, but
yeah,
it's amazing to be nominated. I've had my website for 20-something years and never been nominated.
Oh, no, well, you got to try it next year. It's I was lucky enough to win last year and got to go to New York to the ceremony, and it was a lot of fun and such a cool event. But this year I was a finalist, which is still a big deal, but unfortunately didn't win. But maybe again next year, hopefully.
Hey, it's a huge deal, and if this is not the year you're going to win, is probably a good year not to win because there's going to be no big ceremony.
Right.
And how about social media?
I'm on Instagram at curbfree Cory Lee and on Facebook at curbfree.
Okay. Make sure you guys follow Cory, subscribe to this channel, like this video. And so Cory, what is your favorite American city?
Favorite American city? I would probably have to go with New York. I know it's like very typical. Everyone probably says it, but I really just love like the diversity of things to do. And I think that New York City has they've came a long way in the past even 5 years in regards to accessibility. And so like they used to not have many accessible cabs at all. There were only a few in the whole city. And now they actually have an app called Accessible Dispatch, and you can use it to get an accessible taxi within like 10 minutes. So
does it cost more for that?
No, it's the same price as every taxi in the whole city. So it doesn't cost extra. And I think New York's really came a long way. So I went there for the first time when I was like 15 and had a terrible experience because there was hardly any accessibility. And now when I go, it's like so easy to get around. And it's just really, really remarkable now.
That's great. So what other American cities do accessibility well?
I think Washington, D.C. is a really, really good one. So all of their public transportation is completely accessible, like the metro and buses, all of that's phenomenal. And Las Vegas is really accessible. So they have a lot of accessible taxis, and it's really easy to even just like roll the Vegas Strip and in my wheelchair and just, hit up every casino on the Strip. So Vegas is always a lot of fun.
Oh, good. And how about on the flip side, which ones are the worst cities out of the major cities?
The worst.
If you're comfortable with.
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna say, any kind of like smaller city has some difficulties in regards to transportation, especially. So even like Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I basically live, it's only 30 minutes away. They don't really have any accessible taxis in the whole city. And Atlanta, surprisingly, does not have very many accessible taxis either. So, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird because Atlanta has like the world's busiest airport,
right?
But then the transportation is lacking.
Come on, Atlanta. If you're watching, you can do better. Definitely do better.
Definitely.
And how about internationally? Which cities? Which first of all, which is your favorite American international city, and what international cities do accessibility well?
Yeah. Internationally, I would have to say it's probably a tie between Barcelona and Sydney, Australia. So in Sydney and Barcelona, they both, every mode of transportation that you can think of, it is accessible. So they have accessible taxis, like Sydney has ferries and buses, and then Barcelona has like the metro and buses, which are phenomenal. And Barcelona also has really, really accessible beaches, which is nice. So they have the beach wheelchairs and changing rooms that are accessible. And then in Sydney, it's like Sydney was kind of the first place that I ever traveled to internationally where I felt like accessibility was even better than in the USA. And so I think a lot of places could really learn from what Sydney is doing in regards to accessibility.
Well, that's great to hear. And Sydney is one of my favorite cities, and I've always told people that if I had to live outside the United States, it
Yeah.
would be most likely Sydney or Hong Kong.
Oh yeah. I haven't been to Hong Kong yet, but I want to go. Hopefully one day.
So, which country do you think have the friendliest people in the world?
Friendliest. That's a tough one. I seem to like always make friends, and no matter what country I'm in, but I'm gonna say probably. I really love. I love this is tough. I'm gonna say like I'm thinking like India. I don't know. I had a really good experience in India and just like navigating like through old Delhi and like just meeting random people and
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna say India, but I think it all matters. I mean, how your attitude is. I mean, when I was in Israel, I've met really kind people. When I was in all over Europe, I mean, I've met amazing people. So Finland is also phenomenal. I think as far as friendliness goes, but yeah, there are too many places.
And how about India, by the way? Do they do a good job for accessibility?
So it actually was not even possible for me to go to India until about 2 years ago, because they did not have one accessible van or taxi in the entire country.
Are you
But
kidding me?
about 2 years ago, a company started called Enable Travel, and they now have one wheelchair accessible van in India. And so finally, I was able to go there. And as soon as I learned about that company, I booked the trip immediately, and I was like, I'm finally going. And so it blew past all of my expectations, and they were amazing.
And what's the name of that company again?
Enable Travel.
But they only have one van in India that's for accessibility?
They may have more now, so don't quote me on the one,
Okay.
but I know like when I went, I think they only had the one, but they were working to get more. So hopefully they have by now.
Okay, good. Which country do you think has the meanest immigration officers?
Oh, I had a terrible experience with just in general the whole city, but in Paris, France. I found that the French people. Sorry if anyone's watching and they're French, but they it was just not a good experience for me. So my mom was with me on that trip, and she actually got pickpocketed, and they stole like €1,000 from us. We learned to never travel with that much cash again, and so that started us off like immediately within the first 2 hours of being in Paris. And then we reported it, and they just like did not care. The police didn't like, I don't know. So overall, my experience in Paris was not good, but I do want to go back and give it another chance.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And how was Paris with accessibility? Was it good?
Not really. So when I went in 2011, they only had one accessible taxi as well, in the whole city. And so for that taxi to rent it for just one day, it was like €700. And so for €700, I was able to use it for a day. And it's just wildly expensive, but that was really our only option. So we went for it, and then went back to London and spent like the rest of our time in London, where every black cab in all of London is accessible with a fold out ramp. So London is like phenomenal, but then we went to Paris and just had a terrible experience. But I have heard though that they do now have more accessible taxis. So I would like to go back and give it another shot, and I think it could be better now.
Yeah, well, that's disappointing. So how about your favorite U.S. airport besides Atlanta?
Oh, besides Atlanta, I don't know. I'm gonna say I kind of like Minneapolis and St. Paul. I think it's easy to navigate. It's kind of just really long, and you really can't get lost in that airport.
I think that's where I
So
first met you, by the way, at the
yeah, Mall of America
T-Bex.
probably is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about international airport?
Amsterdam, 100%. It's my favorite. It is my favorite airport, even more than Atlanta almost. I think everyone in the Amsterdam airport, like they actually have a special training that they go through with how to like interact with people with disabilities and how to transfer them in and off the plane, how to load the wheelchair. And they just seem to have like the most experience of any airport in the world. And I've never had a problem in Amsterdam. So I really, really always, if I'm flying to Europe, I always try to do a layover in Amsterdam if I have to.
Well, that's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And do you have a favorite aircraft type?
Not really.
No,
I'm not. I'm not an aviation geek at all.
no.
So,
But
uh,
I mean, how are the regional jets? Are they okay to fly on? Or just
not really. I try to fly. I mean, bigger planes. The
bigger
longer
the
the flight,
better.
the better. I mean, it's really rough because a lot of the smaller aircrafts, it's hard to even get my big like powered wheelchair loaded into the plane. And so that's a bit of it's interesting. Like when I was flying actually to T-Bex from Minneapolis to Billings for the T-Bex in Minnesota or Montana last year. There it was a smaller aircraft, and they were having a little bit of trouble with loading my wheelchair onto that smaller plane. But they eventually made it work, and it all worked out. But yeah, you got to always call the airline in advance and make sure that they kind of know the dimensions of the wheelchair and all that to safely get it loaded.
Gotcha. Well, I know you met a lot of celebrities. Have you ever sat next to any on a plane?
I have actually flown with Julia Roberts. I flew with her to no last summer. Last summer from we were flying from Minneapolis to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and her whole family was in first class, like on that flight. So she was on there, and then I've flown with the guy from I don't know, I can't remember his name, but from a Talladega
Oh
Nights, like
yeah, I know who you're talking
not
about.
Will Ferrell, but the other one.
Right.
But
That
he
guy's
was,
hilarious. John C. Riley.
yeah, that's it. Yep.
And was he a nice guy? Did you talk to him?
I didn't talk to him. I tried to
No.
like leave Julia Roberts and him alone, and I know they
Gotcha.
want their like private time, you know. So
Right. And how about when you're flying or on the ground? What's your drink of choice? I drink water when I'm flying.
when I'm flying, I always drink ginger ale, and I never drink it at home ever. So literally, when I'm flying, that's the only time I ever drink it.
Interesting.
Mhm.
What's your favorite restaurant in the world?
In the world, um, uh, I got to think about this one.
How about your favorite food?
Favorite food is definitely Mexican.
No.
I really love tacos, so anytime there's a taco on the menu, I'm going to be ordering that. I would say favorite restaurant though. There is a restaurant in Tel Aviv, Israel, called the Blue Rooster, and they have phenomenal food. So when I went there, I got like 12 or 13 courses of food, and it was like hummus and falafel, and I love like all kinds of like Israeli food and Mediterranean food. So that was a really good restaurant experience.
Good. And by the way, did Israel do a good job with accessibility?
They do. So they actually have a whole like section on the Visit Israel website devoted to accessibility, and they're really, really trying to better accessibility in the entire country. So Israel is surprisingly doing a really, really good job.
Great.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh, that's a tough one too, because I've eaten a lot of crazy food, but I'm gonna go with guinea pig in Ecuador. It was just a terrible. I don't know. Like when I cut into it, it was like a bunch of little tiny bones, and I don't know. I just like wasn't expecting all of the little bones in it, and it was. I ate like one bite of it, and then gave it to our tour guide, and she happily ate the rest of it. So.
Wow. Yeah. I've never been to Ecuador, and I heard that's the main dish down there, but
Uh,
it's not for me.
yeah.
Favorite hotel?
Uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna say Hilton. Like I always try to stay at Hilton's, really just because they really care about accessibility. And so at Hilton, they actually require now all of their pools to have a pool lift. So I'm able to get in and out of the pools at the Hilton hotels, which is usually not the case at most other hotels. I mean, like Marriott, Hilton, they do a good job because they are the bigger chains. And I mean, I would love to stay at like smaller boutique hotels, but typically they're just really not that accessible. So I usually go with the bigger chains just to get the better access.
Good to know. Um, Favorite travel credit card? Is there a certain one that you use when you travel, or?
I have the Chase Inc. card, so the business.
Yeah, I have that one.
I really love it because you get like 3 times points on travel, and it's easy to rack up a lot of miles and points.
Oh, good. And do you cash in a lot of points or miles for free tickets?
Sometimes I try to like save it up and then only do it like once a year or something. But yeah.
And do you do it for like first class flights or just?
I'm always going for the cheapest. Whatever I can get the most bang for the buck, I'm all over it.
Your favorite island?
Oh, favorite island. I'm gonna say Barbados. I went there a couple years ago for a convention.
T-Beds?
No, it was through
Oh,
SATW.
yeah. I was there.
Yeah. I saw
That's
you
right.
there, and Natalie and Jack were there.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so we were there, and they actually have really good accessibility. So there's a company there called Fully Accessible Barbados, and they have like adapted vans and transportation, and they'll get you like all over the island. And I mean, as you probably know, Barbados is pretty small, so you can see a lot in like one day in a short amount of time.
Right.
And I was able to like even go caving there, and they have like a wheelchair accessible caving thing excursion, and it was like really, really fun. And that's something that I've really never gotten to do anywhere else. So I was like really, really impressed by that.
I mean, it's amazing that you remember all these companies' names. So
Yeah.
I mean, I know you put it on your blog, but are you going to write a book about it? I know you just wrote the children's book, but how about a guide to accessibility?
Yeah. I mean, I am definitely thinking about it. So I do want to get some more travel under my belt before that happens. I don't know what's like the magic number of countries to do that or whatever, but there are some really good guides out there already. I know that Lonely Planet, they actually published an accessible travel resources book. And so they list out the names of like every company in the world that is accessible. And so that's a really, really good resource that I always am like looking back to figure out like, well, can I go to Singapore or wherever it is, you know? So luckily there are some others out there already, but I might write something one day.
Gotcha. Well, that's. How about your favorite travel movie?
The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think I don't know, it's like I really loved that movie even before I became a travel blogger and started traveling internationally a lot. And it's really just made me want to get out there on the road and see what all there was. So I've not made it to Thailand yet, but hopefully one day.
Well, that was my next question. How about favorite travel show?
Anything with Samantha Brown. I'm a huge Samantha fan. I watched her on Passport to Europe growing up, and that's like what sparked the thing with the travel bug within me to want to go to Europe and see the world. And so I really credit her with me being a travel blogger now.
Wow. Well, I know you met her many times. I've seen it, and I will. She's going to be on this channel soon, so
Right. Cool.
I will make sure to tell her when I get her to sit down.
Yeah.
How about a travel book?
A travel book.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, I don't know. I'm gonna say my book.
Good.
Right there. So let's explore with Corcor.
That's a good answer. And actually, I had it on my landing just coming down here, and I was in such a rush, and I left it. I was going to say that was going to be my prop. How about who are some of your favorite travel bloggers and newsletters to sign up to?
I really love Michaela Malazzi of Bare Feet. She has a show on PBS, and she also has a blog and a website, and she is doing a lot of like Facebook Live and Instagram Lives right now. So she's really an amazing person. Her sister is actually in a power wheelchair, and so I've really gotten to know like her and her sister, and it's really been remarkable getting to know her. And then I'm gonna say Onika Raymond. I really love her. She runs what's her Onika the Traveler is
Right.
her blog, and she's really really great. And Johnny Jett, of course.
You don't have to say me, but I know Michaela. We grew up 2 towns over from each other,
Oh, nice.
but I didn't meet her till we started traveling.
Uh,
All right, just 3 more questions. What's your dream destination?
mm, I'm gonna say dream destination. Probably Egypt. I mean, Egypt and Italy are kind of tied for me. So Italy's somewhere that a lot of people like just assume that I've been, because I think everyone in the world has been to Italy except for me. So that's very, very high on my list. And then Egypt, I really just want to see the pyramids. And when I was little, I was like a huge fan of like learning about Egypt, like history and mummies and all of that. And so to finally get together, I think would be really awesome. And there are some accessibility companies in Italy and Egypt. So I know that it's possible. And whenever coronavirus is over with and we get back on the road, those are going to be like the first places that I go to.
I've never been to Egypt.
Wow, really?
And that
I'm
that
surprised.
is top 5 on my list, maybe top 2.
Yeah.
So, but I've been to Italy many times, fortunately. I can't see Italy being too good on accessibility, but
Yeah, I know. That's kind of why I like keep putting it off, because I've heard some good things and then some not so good things. So I think it
gotcha.
kind of just depends on like which city you go to too, though.
Right. How about what's your worst travel moment? I remember reading on your blog that you had a nasty fall.
Yeah, when I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico this past October, I actually fell like, out of my shower wheelchair and got a fractured skull and ended up in the hospital for like a night, and it was terrible. But I wouldn't even say that was the worst. So, so when you said what's the worst, I'm thinking of like the hippo incident. So a couple of years ago, I was in South Africa, and we went to meet Jessica the hippo, and she's a hippo that was actually like raised by humans, and she lives in their house, and it's like a really really bizarre story. But if you're ever in South Africa, you can meet Jessica. And
Do I
so I
want to
went.
meet her?
Do what?
Do I want to meet her? Because this
No,
sounds like it's not going to be good.
it's not going to be good. So when I went to meet her, they handed me a sweet potato, and I was supposed to put it in her mouth and give it to her. But when they handed me the potato, and I was kind of having some trouble like reaching down low enough to reach her mouth, and so I was holding the potato for like 30 seconds, and Jessica, the hippo, got really agitated that it was taking me so long. And so she lunged up like out of the water, and she grabbed the side of my wheelchair with her teeth, and she started pulling me into the water. And so her human dad like came over and started yelling at her to stop, and thankfully she listened to him and stopped like right before I went in the water. So it was pretty scary, and I really don't remember a lot of it because I kind of like blacked out during the whole thing. But we luckily have a bunch of photos of the encounter. So if anyone wants to see the photos in action, it is on my blog.
So what do we search? Cory Lee hippo.
Yeah, just search hippo; it'll come right up.
Okay, man, that is crazy scary.
But it was terrifying.
All right, 2 more questions. What's the most important thing that travel has taught you?
I'm gonna say I think travel has really taught me just to be more empathetic. I mean, I think being able to, see myself in another person, and knowing that, people, there are good people all over the world. Sometimes it may not seem like it, but there really are. If we just look for it, and in any situation, we should really try to be as empathetic as possible.
Amen. And my last question, what is your best travel tip?
Best travel tip. So for a fellow wheelchair user, I'm gonna say to plan as early in advance as possible, because I usually start planning trips like 6 to 12 months in advance, just because it really takes me more time to figure out, what's the most accessible hotel, or what accessible transportation is there, which attractions can I visit, and things like that. So planning as early as possible is definitely better, and it will allow you that to what once you're there within the destination to really have a lot less stress and more fun exploring.
And when you're planning, are you using that Lonely Planet guidebook? And are there any other websites you're using?
I'm using that, and I'm also a bunch of other like travel bloggers that focus on traveling in a wheelchair. So
And,
um,
and do you mind mentioning those?
yeah, so there are some out there. One is Emerging Horizons, and it's by Candy Harrington, and she's actually not in a wheelchair, but she's been writing about accessible travel for like 30 years. So she has published like dozens of books and all about national parks and everything. And she's really remarkable what she's doing. And then another one is wheelchairtravel.org, and it's by John Morris, and then spintheglobe.net by Sylvia Longmire. So there are a few of us out there now, and I'm glad that more and more travel bloggers focusing on accessibility are out there, because I can't cover everything. So it's good that more of us are becoming available and getting more information out into the world to hopefully inspire people to get out there.
And please subscribe to Cory's website, your newsletter. You have a newsletter, right?
I do, yeah.
Is it weekly?
It's kind of whenever I want. So
Okay. Hey.
no schedule, but
I'm thinking about making mine that way.
yeah, I try to do it like monthly, but sometimes it doesn't work out.
So give us the website again.
It is curbfreewithcorylee.com.
There you go. And also please subscribe to johnnyjet.com, this channel, this podcast, and we'll see you next time. Cory, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you.